Hello, my name is Martha Mulerwa. I am a biomedical engineer working with the Uganda Industrial Research Institute in the instrumentation division, where we design medical technologies for low and middle income settings. One of our flagship devices, an electronically controlled gravity feed infusion set. We've designed the device and clinically validated it in both adults and pediatrics, and the results are found to be less than 10%, which is acceptable for infusion devices. Now, our presentation today is focused on recommendations for local medical device design and regulations in low and middle income settings, and using the case study of the ICEHTMC device that was developed in Uganda. The team is Martha Mulerwa, I'm presenting, and my colleague, Mrs. Philip Angaju Makobori. Now, as we all know, most essential medical devices are either unavailable or inadequate in low and middle income settings. And this is mainly due to over-reliance on imported devices. These are often expensive, or they're not tailor-made for these settings. For example, we realized while doing our clinical trials that the decibels, that the alarm sound or the decibel sound that were recommended in the standards were too low for our health facilities that are often overcrowded. So it's highly likely that the equipment that are being sold are not tailor-made for our settings. This has in turn led to delayed diagnosis, therapy, and ultimately loss of lives. Several partners and international health experts and organizations like the World Health Organization have recommended that frugal in-country innovation could be key to some of these inadequacies in medical devices. Now, the team at Uganda Industrial Research Institute has taken on this idea of in-country innovation, and we've designed the electronically controlled gravity feed, or ECGF, it's a mouthful, to address challenges with the safety of intravenous delivery of fluids and medication. Now, the ECGF is a low-cost medical device that monitors and regulates infusion therapy. As you can see with the image on my right, our standard of practice, we get a giving set and connect it directly to the patient, and this is relying on a roller clamp to control infusion delivery. In the developed world, we would normally have infusion pumps, which are not readily available locally. The challenge with this standard of care is the roller clamp is manually adjusted. It's difficult to know when we are giving over infusion or under infusion. It can be controlled by the patient, and the nurse or clinician will not know that it has been stopped or its flow rate increased. It's time consuming because the nurse will have to keep checking on the progress of the fluid. Now with the ECGF, all this is automated. All the clinician has to do is connect the giving set through the device. It will monitor the entire therapy session with alarms that will give off a slow rate, rapid rate, under infusion, in case there's occlusion along the IV line. And at the end of the therapy, it will automatically cut off the therapy and sound an alarm to notify the clinician that the therapy is done. Now, the ECGF has been clinically validated in both adults and children. It has achieved accuracy levels of plus or minus 7% in adults and was found superior to the standard of practice in pediatrics. Now, during our design process, we encountered several challenges. Key among these were limited government investment in research and development, and this also makes it difficult to attract funders, because in several cases they require you to have partial funding. We've had limited or lack of access to standards because we do not have in-country standards for medical devices. We've also lacked access to advisory. I should note that the ECGF was the first of its kind medical device designed in country, so we had nothing to benchmark against, and we had no one to advise us on the appropriate way. Now, the biggest challenge we faced was unclear regulations, or what we term as gray regulatory pathways for clinical trials. We have so many regulatory bodies, as you can see there. We have the National Drug Authority, Ministry of Health, the National Council for Science and Technology, Bureau of Standards, and then ethics review boards for each of the participating health facilities. This derailed our progress and also led to the team losing morale because the process took over 2 years just seeking approval to do clinical trials. Each of the regulatory bodies required clearance from another, so if no one wanted to take what would they call it? No one wanted to take responsibility in case anything went wrong, because, like I mentioned, this is a new field altogether. So how we solved some of these challenges, we adopted international standards, specifically the ISO and the EU standards throughout our design procedures. And we also still followed the ISO standards while preparing our investigational brochures and clinical validation documentation. We had several partners on board that offered us advisory. Needless to say, most were international partners. We did engage all stakeholders mentioned above. Much as it was a repetitive process, we still did engage them. This was time consuming, it was cost exorbitant, and it was demoralizing to the team. Like I mentioned, we took over 2 years seeking clinical validation, approval for clinical validation. Now, our goals for the project and how the final users will benefit. So the overall is we are proposing recommendations for local medical device design and regulations in low and middle income settings, and we are using our experience with the ECGF device to make these recommendations. Recommendation number 1, we need to harmonize regulatory standards within the African region. Only a couple of countries, based on research, have regulatory standards for medical devices. So for us to move further as a region, we need to harmonize our regulatory standards within the region. We need to adopt and modify international standards to better suit our settings. I refer to an example that I mentioned with the ECGF, the alarm settings that we had, where the sound was really low for our crowded health facilities, so the clinicians could hardly hear the alarm sounds go off. We need to harmonize regulatory bodies. Like I've broken down, we have so many regulatory bodies within our country. If we could have fewer bodies with representation from all areas, we could break this down into national and regional bodies. So we could have a Ugandan body that has representation from all the other bodies, and probably have an East African regulatory body to help oversee design processes within the region. We also need to build infrastructure to support local innovation. For example, we need to have a laboratory testing capacity. This is lacking. We also need to adopt existing guidelines from international bodies such as World Health Organization on design and manufacturing. We believe this will benefit government bodies. It will limit or reduce the overlapping in tasks, and ultimately innovators and researchers and developers that are facing the huge burden to deal with the unclear or grey regulatory bodies. Thank you very much, and